began progress, we met Aaron as a genius, of course. That's a word that's overused, but not in his case, and I don't know that I've ever actually applied it to anybody I knew in real life before. But we didn't get to know him as the boy genius or the adolescent genius so many others knew, and I really wish I'd gotten to know about Aaron too. I always kind of did, and especially so over the course of the last week, and I'm sure others of you want the same. The stories have been so glorious and illuminating. So before I begin, I just wanted to mention, this is an aside, that last night I felt like I got to know that part of his life a little bit more deeply when I happened upon a clip that WBEZ posted of a wonderfully sweet interview with a very high-pitched Aaron from 2001 after he won a prize from MIT, which for many of the friends he met online was actually an article. It was actually an article about that award that first outed him as a 13-year-old, and so I just wanted to very much recommend that anybody who cares to look for that. I met Aaron through my unsuccessful run for Congress in 2010 when the PCCC, one of the many important entities that he founded, endorsed me, and he became a fixture in our campaign office. I was in Providence. He was based outside of Boston at the time. And he helped us rig up cheap polls and cheap robocalls, things that helped give our uphill effort a fighting chance. And it was very hard work, but we got to have some fun then too. Felt a personal connection, a friendship from the outset. I remember one early moment when we realized that we kind of got each other in this really strange way. He'd hang out with me during what's known as call time, which is that most despicable part of the modern American campaign. 4 hours a day, during which you call people you've never met before, all across the country, and beg them for money. And I wasn't very good at this, and I very much appreciated his company. And the frequent line that I used to open these conversations was, I hate doing this, and you hate getting these calls, so donate to me, and I can fight for public financing so nobody ever calls you begging for money again. And that would lead to all kinds of discussions about election systems arcana, which is the kind of topic that Aaron and I connected around pretty early on, and he's like one of 3 people in this world with whom one can connect around election systems arcana. And it was a fun topic, but it wasn't so great for raising money. And I can still picture him sitting on the floor over there, just giggling with delight and disbelief during one call when I kind of absurdly tried to explain a concept known as Arrow's theorem to some potential hippie kind of governor on the other side of the country. But I think she did actually contribute. And I know he was a vegetarian, and so I was thrilled one day when we managed to carve out a window in the midst of yet another 14-hour workday for a field trip to my favorite vegan Pan-Asian restaurant in Boston, the kind of place I like so much that I'd go to it just to get takeout and then come straight up to Providence. And he ordered a bowl of white rice, as he famously would. He was a super taster, he insisted, but I hadn't learned that just yet. And I hoped he might go back sometime when he was feeling more adventurous. Many people whom I've spoken to in recent days expressed a particular pleasure in doing things that managed to impress him. Aaron's stamp of approval was a precious indication of something's worth, something's righteousness. That summer, he'd entertain our weary staff with unbelievable stories about his exploits. It was with a certain kind of giddiness that he talked about having outmaneuvered law enforcement during that teaser episode, when he downloaded millions of free public files related to federal court cases, and somehow found himself on the wrong side of the investigation for stealing what the government was calling something like $2 million worth of government property. He'd only recently gotten his hands on his FBI file and loved the Keystone Cops aspects of it, that they couldn't even figure out that he lived in Boston, as was widely known and easy to learn with a quick online search. He was happiest about the part where they explained how they tried to stake out his parents' house in the quiet woods outside of Chicago. And it reads, details. Attempted to locate Aaron Swartz, his vehicles, and to be clear, driving was definitely not one of the respects in which he was precocious. I don't think he ever learned to drive in his life. His driver's license information and picture and others at 349 Marshall Avenue, Highland Park. Drove by address in an attempt to locate Swartz or vehicles related to the residence, but was unsuccessful. House is set on a deep lot behind other houses on Marshall Avenue. This is a heavily wooded dead-end street with no other cars parked on the road, making continued surveillance difficult to conduct without severely increasing the risk of discovery. Chicago considers this lead covered. Really, a threat to all of us. And we could laugh about that in hindsight, but he'd of course been terrified throughout that investigation. He told the New York Times, "I had this vision of the feds crashing down the doors, taking everything away." And a couple of years later, I was with him in his apartment in Cambridge, a day or two after the feds had done precisely that. And I'm sure he was again terrified inside, even if he brushed off questions with a chuckle about the surreality of it all. That work on the congressional campaign quickly transitioned into demand progress, and Aaron's conception of that initial petition in opposition to FOIA, calling it the Internet Blacklist Bill. I remember calling him after the election was over, something like, "Segal, you might have lost that race," he told me, "but I still need you to help me change the world." And we shifted from the halls of Rhode Island Steakhouse to the halls of Congress, trying to make people care about us and care about the cause. And they do now, but back then they absolutely did not. And the guy was going to read the line about stopping soap, but he just told that story far better than I ever could. As amazingly, the whole planet now knows Aaron was indeed a passionate advocate for access to information and for free and open internet. He believed in these things for their own sakes, but moreover, as a means towards the even deeper end of building a world defined by social and economic justice. As Roy touched on, Aaron was brilliant, but what made him even more special is how he resisted the impulse to presume that he alone was responsible for his brilliance, or should benefit from therefrom. He wasn't a techno-utopian. Perhaps he at some point had flirted with that kind of self-affirming, Randian objectivism that seems to attract so many of his technologist colleagues, but if he ever did, I never heard of it, and he rejected it at a very young age. He told me something once like, and I've been fumbling for words, for the wording over the course of the last week, something like, "Segal, you gotta understand, I might be in a bad mood sometimes, might seem kind of antisocial or misanthropic, but don't worry. Whenever there's a problem, I'm always looking for the utility-optimizing solution to it." And his donation to GiveWell is strong evidence of that. So he was a sort of communitarian who was deeply aware of our world's injustices and who understood the constant struggle that is necessary to even begin to remedy them. And he, in part, of course, succumbed to that struggle. One of the roles that I played over the last few days is to try to take all the outrage at Aaron's death and desire to make it something meaningful, to take all of that and turn it into productive, directed activism. I was in D.C. on the Hill over the last couple of days, and all sorts of people want to help. It's really amazing. SOPA allies like Ron Wyden and Zoe Lofgren, both of whom got to know Aaron personally a bit over the course of the fight. And then even right-wingers like Daryl Lysa. They all want to know what they can do to help. And that would be a much easier thing to answer if Aaron had been a normal sort of activist. If somebody who cared passionately about just the environment or just gay rights or any narrow issue or two, and that those are all important concerns that he cared about and I care about. But Aaron wanted everything. He wanted to change the whole world. He was trying to hack the whole world in the best way. He'd even taken to calling himself an applied sociologist. And he had lofty goals for certain, but he stood more of a chance of realizing them than just about anybody else I've ever known. And so it's terribly difficult to find a fitting tribute. We're calling for investigations. We'll push reforms to computer crime laws. We'll try to upturn the criminal justice establishment for him so that what happened to him never happens to anybody else ever again. But then none of it feels like enough. So as I close, I want to mention something just so touching and so surprising that you told me once, and I hope I'm not betraying his confidence, but it's even harder to understand now, and he's been haunting me this week. He confessed to me once that he thought that he, and this is an approximate quote, this was not very long ago, had never actually achieved anything that mattered in his life. He really did say that. And it's evidence of his modesty, but it can only possibly begin to make sense of everything that we wanted to achieve and probably could have achieved. And so it's up to us now to make sure that we might bring some of that to fruition and have it become a part of his legacy. Thank you, and thank